now. And I've got a little spinning beach ball. Hopefully that's going to work.
Rab, you're not listed as recording.
Well, it's came up now. It's a spinning beach ball, so obviously it's taking a minute. Okay, so that's us at 2:40. We'll go ahead and get started. Really, really happy today to introduce you to 4 of my high school students. They're all year 1 freshman high school students. Some of them have been in my class in junior high school for a number of years, some of them just for the past year. They've all had experience of living abroad and then had to deal with the change of coming back to Japan. And we're going to get their experiences on this from a high school level student's perspective, which is in contrast to the junior high school that some of you saw this morning. So with that being said, you're here to hear them, not me. Their experiences is why you're here to kind of pick their brains and pick up on that. So I'm going to get out of the way in just a second. They're probably going to speak for about 5 or 6 minutes each, so we will have a dedicated Q&A time at the end. So if you do have any questions, you can either keep them until the end or write them up in the chat. Both are okay, and we'll deal with the questions as we get to the Q&A session of the presentation. So that being said, I'm going to get out of the way, and Tanki, do you want to take us away?
Thank you, Rab. So my name is Tanki, and I was born and lived on the central coast of California for around 12 years until 6th grade, where I moved to Tokyo. And today I'm going to talk mainly about the difference in the educational system between the United States and Japan. But first, I want to touch on the difference between living in a fairly small city with a population of around 20-something thousand to Tokyo, the biggest city in the world. Now, you can do much more in Tokyo. There are opportunities to volunteer, work with numerous other schools, and get involved in competitions, whether that be sports or educational. If you name it, then it's probably in Tokyo. And that's just not possible in a smaller community. On the other hand, my school in California had a lot of field trips, 5 to 6, sometimes 7 to 8 a year. And this was possible because there were a smaller number of students. And since not as many schools were in the area, points of interest where schools would normally take students were not crowded with students. This could also be a difference between the United States and Japan entirely on how open places are to school students, but that would be a different topic. So now I'm going to focus on my main point here concerning the difference between the learning systems. And I think the first major point is the use of textbooks. In Japan, most of the curriculum is based off of the textbooks used in school, and the flow of classes is generally determined by the same textbooks as well. On the other hand, while I can't speak for the entirety of the United States, my school district, and specifically my school, didn't use textbooks at all. Instead, there was a curriculum based on pre-planned units that the school came up with, pretty much equivalent to the chapters in Japanese textbooks. Change can also be observed in the way students gain knowledge and learn in general. In Japan, students keep notes in their own notebooks or handouts given by teachers, and these are most of the time a style predetermined by the teachers in many cases. And in some classes, the whole class is just basically copying what the teacher writes on the board. And this is inefficient because it's an unnecessary 2-step process where the teacher writes information from textbooks onto the board, and then the student takes that information from the board into their own notes. So this middleman of sorts in the middle, the teacher writing on the board, could just be accomplished by the student Googling the same facts or just reading the textbook. And assignments in many cases in Japanese students. In contrast, in the United States, the teacher not only used the whiteboard, but also videos, YouTube videos, and documentaries and handouts, but most of the knowledge gained was not stored on paper. Rather, it was gained by engaging in a project, whether that be creating a trifold poster presentation and a full-blown costume to resemble a historical figure for history class, or making a solar cooker out of cardboard and seeing who can bake a cookie the fastest for science class. And this is one thing that is starting to get incorporated into Japanese classrooms, but the progress is painfully slow. In Rab's English class, we gained knowledge through giving presentations and writing blogs and reflections on the classes, not writing in notebooks, copying the board, and taking written exams. And this was similar to the learning I experienced in the United States. And this is why Japanese schools need to start implementing changes in their educational systems, because they lag far behind those used by schools in the United States or schools in Europe. The old system relies too heavily on students just basically copying information and jotting down notes instead of actually engaging in something meaningful where they can engage in making a video or giving a presentation, which is much easier to actually learn information. And I think one of the hurdles against this change being implemented in Japan is the technology, which is another big change between the learning in California and Japan. And to talk more about that technology, I'm going to hand it off to Miki.
Thank you, Tanki. So next, I will be discussing about technology. Hi, my name is Maki Matsumoto, and I will be covering about the technological differences between Japanese and American schools. So for some background context, I lived in Los Angeles for the vast majority of my life, 15 years to be exact, and I was born and raised there. And while I was raised there, I attended the nearby public elementary, middle, and high school. And in between those years, I went to Japan every summer, and during those times I attended the nearby public elementary and middle school. So I believe I have some insight in between what the education system is, the styles of teaching, and how they go over in schools in both Japan and the US. And one thing that was always constantly pointed out to me was why does Japan use so little technology? And it always constantly surprised me of how little Japan used it compared to the US. So in comparison, in the US, I've been taught to use technology from a very young age. By the time I was in elementary school, we were doing most of our tests on computers. State testing was on computers as well. And in third or fourth grade, we also had the STEM program, which stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, in which the school provided all classrooms with iPads in every single classroom. So we are able to do this program so we can build 3D models in using iPads and also building real life models as well. And in middle school, we were provided with Chromebooks in every single classroom, and most of the homework was was digital as well. And we also had digital media production and also computer science as an elective. In high school, it is similar to middle school. Chromebooks were provided in every single classroom, and we were given Chromebooks for people who wanted to use them at home as well. So they were allowed to be borrowed. And also at my school specifically, it's not for every single high school, but at my school, they provided different subjects such as computer science, engineering, computer systems, digital production, and much more advanced classes in these subjects such as honors and APs. And APs are college level classes in these subjects. And as well, in the US, we have a day called National Coding Day, which I believe most of the schools in the US participate in, and we give about an hour or two dedicated just to code. And we use this website, which made coding fun and not a difficult process because they used like very popular characters or favorite characters that kids use. So it wasn't just simply coding or typing in some letters. On the other hand, I remembered when I was in Japan, in the elementary school, I think in 4th and 5th grade, and in middle school, I was there for 7th and 8th grade. We used computers for very little. I think we used it like once or twice for the whole time I was there. And I was there for about 2 months. So it's almost about a trimester. And even though when we did utilize it, it was just to play games or just to have fun. It was never to actually learn about coding or programming or anything like technological. And I believe that this is something that has to change in Japan or in the Japanese education system, and they have to do that by inputting more technology into their classes. And this is because our classes have become more and more technologically advanced. So in order for Japan to keep up with many of the other countries that are technologically advanced, they have to start inputting more classes in like that, because at this rate, for example, an elementary student in the US might know how to code, but it might take years and years for a middle school or high school Japanese student to learn how to code, which already shows they're already lagging behind right now. And so this concludes my presentation, and going next is Mitsuki.
Thank you, Miki. So hi, my name is Mitsuki Saito. I am a high school student residing in Tokyo, Japan. I was born and raised abroad, specifically Beijing, China, for the vast majority of my life, and have attended profuse amounts of schools both in and outside of Japan. Therefore, I think I have a broad spectrum of educational experiences to draw on as I express my opinions on change today. Subsequent to Miki, I will be discussing my experience and opinions on how social issues are taught in schools. As my fellow students, Tanki and Miki, have spoken about, all of us returnees are very accustomed to drastic changes in our educational environments. Regarding technology, my school back in Beijing was especially advanced, with everyone having computers from elementary school, and I was part of the school TV production team utilizing green screens and professional editing softwares, drones, and designing VR games. And looking back on it now, it was pretty crazy. Regardless, being provided the opportunity at school to learn these things is really imperative because it helps students adapt to a technological environment and prepare us for what is to come in the near future as we step into the burgeoning field of technology. Before going off on a tangent and speaking about Miki's part, let me get back on track to talking about social issues. So first, enrolling into an IB school basically means we will be exposed to a wide spectrum of social issues and have to research about them. And in Beijing, and also in the school right now, I attend an IB school. So even though I'll be talking about the differences between the two, the foundation is kind of similar. And when being given an assignment, I would think the norm is for students to possess an inherent dislike towards it, but I don't remember it being like that in my previous school. So back in Beijing, I recall being given a social issue to research about and a few questions to answer. But other than that, the way we designed our final product and our action plan was working towards that final product was entirely up to students. And this automatically required copious contemplation on first scrutinizing the issue and then analyzing what we wanted to know and thought was valuable to present to our classmates. And since everyone was doing their own thing, that stimulated each other to go extensive in our own projects. I remember spending hours on end devouring a project, but with passion. Regardless, homework was maximum 1 hour per day and with all the subjects combined. Therefore, all of us would really focus in class to get the job done. And that was a really smart tactic that I think teachers should incorporate, especially in my school, where most of my subjects give too much assignments. And just for your information, when I say I am by no means criticizing Rab's class, because he does not give loads of meaningless homework. So minimum homework was a significant factor in providing students the time and opportunity to research things they were interested after school or pursue their passion. As of right now, I'm pretty keen about various social issues, especially environmental issues, which was only made possible because I wasn't constantly bombarded with tasks and had the room and brain capacity to think about other things after class. And also the way social issues introduced was not overwhelming. In my school right now, when learning about social issues in class, topics and methods are rather fixed for the most part, but sometimes when we have long-term projects, students are given the freedom to choose whatever floats their boat. Of course, the decisions we are able to make on our own broaden every year as we progress into a higher grade. So that is one kind of change as well. And to say the least, I'm definitely in support with this change. expecting a high quality product when students are not interested or engaged in the task is pretty difficult. And contrarily, when students do something they truly feel compassion towards and choose by themselves, the energy exerted and the output is impressive, if I do say so myself as a student. And of course, there are things that students should know regardless of their interest. But from a student's perspective, I cannot stress enough that if any of you here are teachers and want students to be interested in social issues moving forward, creating as much freedom as possible is the best solution I can think of. And that will conclude my part. And to end off our speech today, Sarah will talk about club activities and her experience in numerous countries around the world.
Up until now, we've been talking about the changes in the educational system, technology, and social issues. Lastly, I'll be talking about the changes in school activities. Hello, my name is Sarah, and I'll start by giving a brief introduction about myself. I was born in Malaysia and lived there for 5 years, and then moved to Germany and lived there for 2 years, then to Thailand, and in 2017, I moved to Japan for the very first time. Living in four different countries and going through countless changes was strenuous, not to mention all the schools I had transferred to. But despite this, I was able to find both the good and bad in each school systems and was able to learn a lot about cultural differences. So starting off with Thailand, my experience in Thailand, I attended St. Andrews International School in Bangkok, which is a British international school with an IB program, providing a range of opportunities for students. Throughout my 5 years of attending this school, I participated in many school activities, and one of them being the yearly sports event called Fabisia Games. Fabisia is a not-for-profit membership organization in the international education sector that currently has 87 member schools spread out through 19 countries and regions within Asia, and we compete with several sports including football, swimming, athletics, basketball, and t-ball. Every year, 7 girls and boys are selected from each grade, and for the year 2016 and 17, I was able to make the team. Every day of the week, I practiced 5 different sports for 3 years, and working with grades from above and under, I developed high communication skills and learned the importance of teamwork. Not only were these after-school clubs fun and enjoyable, but they were the highlights of my years in Thailand. I found it amusing how schools from different areas around Asia got to get together and have an opportunity to meet each other, and surprisingly, I still keep in touch with most of them. Other than Fabisia, I was part of the Thai dance team, pottery club, ballet club, and the school orchestra. Without having any limits to the number of club activities to join in, I tried many new things and simultaneously enjoyed seeing my friends also try their own activities. After moving to Japan and attending both Japanese primary schools and high schools, I realized the differences in school activities and what their purpose were. The majority of Japanese schools only offer 1 club activity per student, and although there are unique clubs that students can opt for, such as kendo, sado, and other traditional Japanese activities, they tend to value enhancing individuals' abilities rather than providing various opportunities for their students. And I believe the wide choice given in my school in Thailand allowed me to be more interested in things that I had never done before. Therefore, I believe Japanese schools lack the ability to support children's interests and to lift the burden of the pressure and expectations to be good and skillful at one thing. Creating an environment that allows students to choose several clubs is very crucial. This implements the idea of challenging themselves and encourages students to do new things that can lead to a better education environment in Japan. So today we talked about changes in our lives, and we hope you enjoyed our presentation. Thank you. After this opportunity, we are very honored to be here today. Lastly, are there any questions?
All right, we've got about 10 minutes left. So just like with the session this morning, I'll just open the floor and fire away with the questions. I'll give them that round of applause first. Why don't we do that? Yeah, if you're doing virtual hands as well. So, question time. Wayne?
Yeah, I put a question in the chat, but basically I was just thinking about the balance between analog and digital, just preparing ourselves for that, for the eventuality of living in a digital world. The good points, bad points between still writing on paper versus fully going fully going digital, or is it one or the other, or is it just go digital?
For me, I would say that like schedules and like journaling is something I'd always opt doing analog, but for everything else, I would try to go digital.
What about everybody else? Tinky, Sarah, Miki, preferences for paper versus digital?
My preference would definitely be digital because my school used to do paper, and even in my high school right now, we still use a lot of paperwork. But by doing digital, we can just have like our MacBooks and phones with ourselves. So I feel like it's more easier to take your notes around and see it whenever you want. So I'm definitely a digital person.
Tinky, Miki?
I think the best choice is just to give the choice to the students themselves, because, you know, if I was given the choice, I'd definitely prefer digital because I can just keep everything in one place instead of having to write them everywhere. But, you know, some students probably will prefer notes that are analog over digital any day. And I think it's just important for the students to have the choice to choose whatever they want.
Okay, Miki? And then we'll go to Namiko for a question after Miki and then David.
For my preference, I believe I like to go digital in certain things, just like Tanki. I think it's a lot easier when you have things in just one place. But for me, from what I've learned from doing both paper and completely paperless classes, I prefer paper for taking notes.
Okay, Namiko, you've had your hand up.
Thank you for your presentations. Obviously, each of you kind of experienced a very different school environment. One of the questions that I have, especially regarding returnees, you know, like myself and yourselves, who study abroad, we are quite privileged, right? So it's kind of like the expat life where your parents can afford to pay for your education. And I'm just kind of wondering, if I compare my private high school boarding experience with my first year as a freshman in high school, attending a public school, do you think that it would be different? Because, sorry, Rab, I'm not too familiar about their school environment right now, but I'm kind of thinking that maybe it is a private school, and so.
No, can I just jump in? It's a public school that's got a double track certification. One side is certified by Momoko Gakusho and the other one is IB. And when they get to, I think it's maybe the next year, the students have to choose whether they're going the IB diploma route or sticking with the Momoko route. They get to decide. But at younger years, junior high school, like the students you saw this morning, they do classes from both sides, but it's a public school.
So it is a public school. So there is no entrance examination then?
I think there is.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of my point. And also, I know that the program sometimes is different for returnees to make it easier so that you can assimilate back to the Japanese school environment. But I guess one question that I had was, if you didn't go abroad, had you never gone abroad and just kind of led your life in Japan, would it have been different?
Oh, I'll go first then. So my life, I was born in Malaysia and I lived abroad for 13 years. So this is my 4th year living here in Japan. And I definitely think that my experience of the 13 years abroad has made who I am right now and made my personality. And looking at my friends who have lived in Japan but still speak English, they do have the same knowledge, and people have I don't feel like the English skills depends on whether you live abroad or not, because I still see friends who are really good at English who have been living in Japan for their life. So I feel like the experience is beneficial and could be an advantage in other areas like communication skills and teamwork. So that is what I have learned.
Yeah, and I think, Sarah, in your case as well, because you lived in various countries, you also have a network now. Like you have this worldwide network that
Yeah.
maybe you wouldn't have had in one place, right? Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else got anything to say for Namiko's question?
I was born in China. I was born in China, and if I didn't go abroad, I don't think I would have even learned Chinese nor English. And the skills I attained outside of Japan would probably not be able to be attained in Japan. And I really do think that I'm privileged in that way, although there are challenges being a returnee. Yeah, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Miki.
actually, my high school roommate in boarding school, she was from Shanghai. So, you know, when you do meet people from, you know, all parts of the world, it really does open a lot of doors.
Yeah.
For me, since I was born in America, it would probably be if I didn't come to Japan. So in the United States, I learned Japanese through going to a Japanese school every Saturday. I didn't have to do that, but I wanted to learn Japanese because my mother was Japanese and I wanted to be able to talk in Japanese. But if I never came to Japan, I would just be another kid in California who could speak Japanese, but I couldn't really, utilize my experience in a different way. Like coming to Japan from America, you can utilize that experience, but not if you were only in one country for your entire childhood life. Then I think it'd be harder to, utilize the different communication skills you acquired through being able to speak two languages.
Okay, Miki?
Similar to Tanki, I was born in California and I just moved to Japan. And if I didn't move to Japan, I would probably have been a normal, average second generation Japanese American that did not speak a lot of Japanese, because when I was growing up, I did not felt like the need to speak Japanese. But then I was also very lucky that my parents thought of the idea of letting me and my siblings go to Japanese schools when we did go in the summer, which allowed me to bring a lot of curiosity to Japan, the language and the culture, which is ultimately what pushed me to want to come to Japan.
David, do you have your hand up?
Yeah. Excellent presentation. Thank you, all four of you. And I agree with all the things that you say, but it's puzzling that Japanese in international test scores, Japanese students rank much, much higher than American students do, high school students do. So there's something other than just the test scores in science, math, and engineering and so on that you gain from living abroad and studying abroad and studying with Rab. I think that's one thing. And the other thing is that I think you're exactly right about Japanese junior high school, and universities. But I think you're shortchanging Japanese elementary schools. Even the public elementary schools are a lot more experiential. They do experiments. They have the students do a lot of the things, maybe not with the computers, but they do also do that. My daughter went through the elementary schools, and she had just a public elementary school, and she had an amazingly interesting, wonderful experience there. So I think, unfortunately, it doesn't connect to the junior high schools, and universities in Japan. That's all I want to say. Thank you for the great presentations.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot less structure in terms of the rules and things at the elementary school compared to junior high. I mean, my own kids, they went to the local public elementary, then junior high, and then my older son's just finished private high school. But certainly the high school and the junior high, a lot more rigid, a lot more uniforms, a lot more fixed things compared to the elementary. But I still wasn't overly happy with the elementary either. I mean, to me, when as a teacher, watching some of these classes that the parents get invited to watch, it was still very teacher-centric, teacher-controlled for my liking. But it is what it is. Anyone else? Namiko, did you have your hand back up again, or was that just you forgot to take it down
Sorry,
from last
I
time?
just lowered it. Sorry.
Oh, okay, right. Not a problem. Well, we're just about out of time. That's, I guess, been almost perfect timing there. One quick thing that I did notice in my own teaching, I like to try and bring in cultural things as metaphors and examples to use to highlight things. And of course, me being me, one of the things that I usually bring in is Star Wars. And the one thing that I've noticed the difference between the returnees and the normal sort of Jun Japa is the percentage of people who have actually seen Star Wars goes up exponentially related to the time that they've spent abroad. Because I've had like university classes where it's all been Japanese people and like none of them have seen Star Wars. And I'm like, duh, all my teaching metaphors are not going to work. So there's like a pop culture language that you expect to draw on when you're teaching certain things. And if you're teaching students who don't have that international experience, a lot of those things aren't really going to work. Gar Reynolds has got an amazing anecdote. He teaches about this, about using time.
I'm sorry, but the next presentation starts in 5 minutes in this room. And
all right, but we're still on 310. Check out Gar Reynolds' Death Star PowerPoint thing, and he explains how it works perfectly with international audiences and doesn't with Japanese ones. They don't get the joke. So there is those cultural things there that's part of teaching. And we're now on 11, so I'll shut up and move out the way. Thanks.